last session. We talked about so many concepts in our last session about the concept of absolute truth, the concept, 3 ways of understanding the truth. So maybe first few minutes I was thinking maybe I can ask you guys some questions just to help you refresh the knowledge. And then you can share your reflections and realizations. How does that sound? You need extra cup of coffee? Okay. Everybody disappeared for their cup of coffee.
I ran out of coffee this morning, so I needed extra.
Okay. So I already posted the assignment for session 9. So maybe I'll just ask some questions from that assignment. How do the Vedas define absolute truth? And what's the Sanskrit term for that? Absolute truth.
Is it Hare Krishna?
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Is it Sat? Or is it Brahman?
Okay. You're going in the right direction.
Is it Jamadhyasya Yatta?
Yeah, who said that? Okay. Min?
That from which everything emanates, who maintains and destroys everything?
Yes. That's a very precise definition of absolute truth. Janma Adi Asya Yataha. That's the first aphorism of Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra is all the Vedas, which are like an ocean, codified into a select number of statements or aphorisms or axioms that can maybe fit into your wallet. So like the ocean fitting into your hand, that is Vedanta Sutra. So therefore they're very cryptic, very hard to understand. And therefore Vyasa, who is the compiler of all the Vedas, he explains them in a commentary, which is the Bhagavad Purana or Srimad Bhagavatam. So the first aphorism of Vedanta Sutra is Athato Brahma Jigyasa, that now that you have this human life, inquire about the absolute truth. And then in the next aphorism, he describes what is this absolute truth as Janma Adiyasya Yataha. That is the first verse of Bhagavatam also, by the way, where the absolute truth is defined. So Janma means something from which something emanates, the source of everything. So this absolute truth is the source of everything, but not just the source. It's easy to produce something, much harder to maintain it. So the word Adi there means maintenance as well as destruction. So Janmadi means creation, maintenance, and destruction. That's one who is the source of all these 3 things, is the absolute truth. So everything, not just this material universe, which is just a tiny universe, but all the universes in the material world, but not just the material world, which is just a tiny part of the whole creation. The bigger part is the spiritual world. So everything in the material world, everything in the spiritual world, one who is the source of all of it. Of course, in the spiritual world, there is no destruction because everything stays there forever. But at least in the material world, there is also destruction. So absolute truth is that from which everything emanates, that is being maintained by everybody. And then further on, Bhagavatam describes that Janma Dashyata Anvayat Itaratas Chartheshu Bhigyaswarat, that who is aware of everything, who is It's not just God, the absolute truth creates something and then just like I can't find my wallet most of the time or can't find my keys where I kept them. He's not like that. He's fully aware of where everything is, what's going on in the heart of every living entity, a tiny, tiny insect, a tiny microbe, not just in this universe, but every single universe. So that is the absolute truth, much beyond our sectarian conception of God. Um, um, but it is something very broad uh, and very kind of define all our conceptions of what is possible and what is not possible. So that is absolute truth. That is the definition of absolute truth. Okay. What are the three ways of understanding this absolute truth that is given in the Bhagavad Gita? Or how do people approach this absolute truth? Three ways in which people can approach this absolute truth or understand this absolute truth. Or the absolute truth manifests itself in these three ways. So whichever way you put the question. And if you want, you can open the slideshow that was posted on Mighty Networks to help you. But these are questions directly from our presentation. So
Is this the Brahman? I don't know the second one, the Super Soul, and then the Bhagavad.
yes, perfect. So the three ways people approach this absolute truth or understand this absolute truth is these, or realize the absolute truth is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Um, can somebody explain what is Brahman and what is Paramatma and what is Bhagavan? What do you understand by these terms?
Was Brahman the first created of the universe? He kind of created the how to describe it, like all the life forms of the universe. Brahma, is that?
So there is a difference between, let me type it in the chat. You're talking about Brahma, and what we are talking about here, Brahman.
Okay.
Brahman. That is
Brahma.
different from Brahma. Brahma is the four-headed first
Yeah.
living entity in the universe. So he's different. That is, we are not talking about Brahma here. We're talking about Brahman, an aspect of the absolute truth.
Is that the it says here the individual soul, the impersonal, all-pervasive aspect of the supreme personality of Godhead?
Yes. So Brahman is the all-pervasive aspect, impersonal aspect of the absolute truth. It's like the light emanating from the spiritual effulgence emanating from the supreme absolute truth. So Prabhupada explains the example of sun and the sunlight. So the sunlight is pervading everywhere, but the energies of the sun is pervading everywhere in the form of heat and light. But that heat and light is impersonal. There is no person there. But in the absolute truth, the person is there, which is Krishna. So this Brahman is an aspect of approaching the Supreme or perceiving the Supreme as this infinite energy field or energy or light, whatever you may call it. That is Brahman. Some people, they are only attracted to understanding the absolute as this light or energy. Their heart is not attracted to understanding the Supreme as a person. They're not so interested in having a relationship with the person, Supreme Absolute Person. So Krishna is very merciful. He says, okay, if you don't want to see me, if you don't want to relate to me, but you still want to approach me, you can approach me through this light, this energy, this Brahman. And that way you have some relationship with the Supreme. It may not be complete, but it is better than not having anything. So, and it allows you to free yourself from this material body. So it is still very powerful, but it is a preliminary understanding. What was the example that we used in our presentation to describe the Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan?
The train, right?
The train. And then what does the Brahman compare to in the train example?
It's that night sky with the light. Just you could see it through the kind of coming down the tracks.
Yeah, so you just see the light. You don't see the train, you don't see anything, you just see the light approaching you. And that's how that absolute appears to a person as Brahman. And what is Paramatma realization? What is Paramatma? Or the super soul?
Is that the witness and the guide who accompanies the soul, conditioned soul?
Yes. So the super soul is an expansion of Krishna just for the purpose of running the show in all the material universes. It's a special expansion of Krishna just for this material realm. Because in the material realm, we don't know how to run this place. Somebody has to run it. It's a complex place. So Krishna mercifully appears as a super soul to run this place. And he sits in the heart of everybody, sits in every atom and molecule. And he runs the show. And that is a super soul realization. So when somebody wants to relate to God, not in complete love, but they want something, some material benediction from God. They see God as, so they have advanced beyond seeing God as just light and energy to, okay, I see that God is a person and he's the most powerful person in this material universe. And I'm attracted to God with the desire of receiving some really powerful siddhis or powers, yogic powers. So there are 8 yogic powers explained in the Vedas, becoming lighter than the lightest, smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest, acquiring anything that you want from a distance, and like so on and so forth. There are 8 yogic powers. So when somebody wants these powers and wants to become a very powerful entity in this material universe, so then they're approaching this absolute truth with that desire as the super soul. So they don't have a complete attraction for God to serve God in love, but they want to meditate on God to get something from God for their own material benefit. So Krishna mercifully allows to be approached in that case as a super soul. And he fulfills the desire of such people who engages with him in the super soul realization. So at least they are accepting God as a person and they want to engage to get something, not completely in love, but better than not engaging. So this is the second realization somebody can have about God as the super soul, as the and as the most powerful entity in the universe. And they don't really have a clear understanding of the spiritual realm yet, because they are focusing on God in relationship with this material world. So their understanding is not complete yet. They don't have a complete understanding or knowledge about what is the spiritual world like, what does God do in the spiritual world, what will I do in the spiritual world. That understanding is missing because that person is not even interested in that so much. They are just interested in getting material powers in this material universe. So that is the Paramatma or super soul realization. And in that, yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I do have a question about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
If that is, if why is that not part of the getting to know God? Is taking your knowledge in steps, and one being not quite committed to loving God, but still interested and curious. I'm dealing in the material world, and these are thoughts that I have, and it seems to fit in with the explanation that you're giving for, is this Fairmont? Is that how you say it?
Paramatma or super soul?
Paramat, super soul, yeah.
Paramatma, yeah.
Yeah. Am I misunderstanding it, or?
I didn't get your question. So you're saying that?
Since we live in the material world and we're talking about humans, right? Is this not a natural step toward loving God? First, trying to understand, and do you know what I mean?
Yes, I understand your question now. So yes,
Yeah.
very good question. But people who commit to this super soul realization, they are not so much interested in developing a loving relationship with God. Somehow their heart is not so attracted towards that.
Mhm.
Because Krishna presents this knowledge about Brahman and Paramatma and Bhagavan, not only in Bhagavad Gita, but in all the Vedic texts. This knowledge is already given. And the yogis who are studying this literature, even after studying it, their heart is just attracted to the super soul realization. What can you do? This is where my heart is. And when Krishna was speaking Bhagavad Gita, there were all kinds of people listening. That's why he is speaking the different philosophies, this Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, all these different yoga systems he's explaining in the Bhagavad Gita, because he knows that not everybody is attracted to having a loving relationship with God. And God never forces that on anybody. So he said, okay, if you're not interested in this, then maybe you will be interested in this. So Krishna is casting a very wide net here in terms of attracting us from where we are. And yes, people will progress from that to the next and next. If they are sincerely seeking God, then finally they will end up at the point where they want to develop a loving relationship with God. But that may not come just right in the first time. Krishna says it may take many, many lifetimes. Bahunam janmanam yante jnanvan mam prapadyate. After many, many lifetimes, the person may come to the point that I'm done with this indirect business. I want to have a loving relationship with God. I just want to love you and serve you, Krishna. I don't want anything else. It may not come so easily, that point. One has to go through this evolution. Some people may just come to that directly, like most of you. I mean, I see all of you having that natural attraction for loving God. But very few people come to that point. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 3, that so many people want to know about the truth. What is the truth? And out of those so many people, only very few people approach me, either as Brahman or Paramatma or Bhagavan. Out of those, very tiny fraction actually get to know me in truth. So coming to the point where we actually want to love God and serve God is a very refined point in our consciousness, evolution of our consciousness. And it comes after many lifetimes of pursuing the truth.
Thank you. That is it's helping me along.
So even though the Krishna is speaking this, that Krishna says so many places in the Bhagavad Gita that you don't have to worry about anything else. Just develop a loving relationship with me, and you will come to me. Abandon all varieties of religion, just surrender to me. You will come to me. Just think of me and serve me. You'll come to me. You'll see in Bhagavad Gita, this is one refrain that Krishna says again and again and again and again. And even after hearing this, there are so many people who are not attracted to that. So what can you do? Krishna says, okay, this is where you are. So you connect with me as Super Soul, or you connect with me as Brahman. Or even if you can't connect with me, read in 12th chapter, Krishna is very mercifully explaining that the highest form of worship is to connect with me in love, where you can't think of anything else other than me. But if you can't do that naturally, then practice bhakti yoga, through which you will develop a spontaneous desire to love me and serve me. If you can't do that, then just work for me or develop knowledge. He gives step by step. If you can't do this, then do this. If you can't do this, then do this. If you can't do this, then do this. So we start from wherever we are. Krishna is not saying, hey, if you can't do the highest thing, then you're out. Krishna is including everybody. No matter where you are, you start from where you are. And if you have a genuine desire, you will end up at the highest destination, which is loving Krishna.
It's like climbing a ladder.
Yes, it's climbing a ladder. You start from where you are.
Thank you, Loka.
Thank you. Thank you, Julianne, for your wonderful comment. Yeah, he speaks to every one of us in the language we understand. He speaks to the birds, he speaks to the animals, he speaks to everyone. Just hold on 1 second, I'm getting a call, I need to take that. So hold on. Actually, my parents are coming here, so they're coming from the airport, so I'm just giving them the directions to come to the place where we are staying. So I may have to again interrupt as soon as they come in. But I'll join you back as soon as I receive them and settle them down. So don't go away. Anybody else? So Paramatma super soul realization is compared to what in the train example? Go ahead, Devanshi.
Yeah, I just want to say what you just explained about the different paths of yoga and the different paths to God makes a lot of sense. It really resonated with me because I spent some time just studying Raj Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga. And while it made so much sense to me, right? It gives you pointers towards seeing God. But there was an aspect of it that did feel very impersonal. It almost felt like you could go all the way to the edge, but then there was something missing, like to take that leap, towards realizing God. There was something missing. And I felt that for a very long time. Whereas with Bhakti Yoga, I feel like you don't really need that intellectual, you don't even need the intellectual understanding. You just need the surrender, you need the love, you need the devotion. And I think when you get to that point, it just, whatever you feel, when you feel the connection, then it doesn't really, you don't even have the desire to understand God from an intellectual perspective necessarily. It just settles right into your heart. So that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. The path of the impersonal realization is heavily based on intellect, understanding the Upanishads and really trying to understand the difference between matter and spirit. It requires a lot of intellectual energy and prowess to get to Brahman realization. That's what the scientists are trying to get to. Is Einstein's desire to come with a unified field theory is basically that unified field theory he was seeking is actually Brahman. Because Brahman is where all these contradictions between the different laws of physics are resolved. So that's what the scientists are getting. That's the ceiling that they have is to reach Brahman. But I guess let's see when they get there. Some scientists they have acknowledged, like Carl Sagan and many of them, they recognize that the Vedas actually are pointing in that direction. Raja Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, they are kind of in between impersonal and super soul realization, but their ceiling is super soul realization. So again, approaching God not so much with love, but with the desire to get something from God. And again, a lot of intellect is required. Bhakti Yoga is you're convinced. Okay, I don't need to be convinced about God anymore. Bhakti Yoga is that now it has entered your heart, and now you're already convinced. And now when we try to understand or study about God, it's more from a point of view of, wow, okay, really understanding God from the heart, not just from our mind and intellect. So in Bhakti Yoga, it's not that we abandon our study of God through these different texts, but now we study these texts from a point of view of wonder and love, not just trying to convince ourselves anymore. Okay, this question, are we even meant to meet God in human life? Like really? Are we good enough to approach him? It almost feels invasive that we must find him. Yes, this human life is actually precisely meant for understanding, loving, and reaching God. That's what this human body is created for. This is the perfect vehicle for that. And therefore, Krishna is giving such detailed instructions in the Bhagavad Gita and all the texts. Use this time in this body for this perfection. If it was not so, then Krishna would not give us those instructions.
I have a question, just to kind of clarify something. So my niece was really, really sick recently, and I found myself like praying for her. And so is that an example of like, because I'm at that point I didn't know what else to do, but I was seeking something like that's like you're seeking something from God. So is that in that mentality? Does that make sense?
Very good question. So let me answer that question just in a second. It looks like my parents just arrived at the door. So I'm going to receive them and settle them down. So give me 5 minutes and I'll come back and answer that question. But that is different from the super soul realization. We can approach Krishna with whatever we need in our material life. Krishna is very accommodating. He says, rather than going somewhere else, you come to me directly and I'll take care of it. So it's not that he doesn't want us to approach him for our material problems. He's very happy taking care of us, every single aspect of our life that he is taking care anyways. But he feels very happy when we approach him with our problems, and he's very happy solving them for us. So I'll come back in a second.
Are there others of you who are just at this very first step, the neophyte step, where we really don't grasp everything yet? I mean, I can tell you've all got questions but they're all at such elevated levels. Am I the only one who's just coming in and not knowing anything about Krishna? No, I see you shaking your head. Yeah, thank you.
I'm brand new to all of this, Jean.
Sorry, say that again.
I said I'm brand new to all of this.
You are, yeah, but you do still sound so knowledgeable. Have you done?
Oh, well, you sound knowledgeable to me, so.
No.
You ask
All
beautiful questions.
All questions, yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm just trying to take it in, I think.
Yeah.
Jean, I'm also very new. I mean, I've taken Bhagavad Gita class. This is my second time. My first time was last September. And since then, like beginning or like January this year, I started reading the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that Loka Vidarbha sort of refers to many times.
Uh-huh.
And those books are amazing to learn deeply more about Krishna because and it's really kind of difficult. I'm still in the first book, just halfway through after like five months. So you take your time, but you start to, and I can't grasp, I grasp like tiny bit of it. So I'm seeing this as like a lifetime effort to get to know Krishna. But it's such a beautiful book. It's considered to be, you know, Krishna himself giving us this knowledge. And it just gives you so much, such an in-depth information as to who Krishna is, at least the portion I'm reading. Just the metaphysics of who God is, who Krishna is. It's really, really awesome. You kind of start to see what beautiful order that there is in understanding God.
Yeah. Would you either put that in the chat or send me a message or
Yeah, I could.
We can handle that. I'm having difficulty translating things from pronunciation into a written form.
Min, can I ask, do you know what canto they were reading from the other night?
Laura, yeah, that was, I want to say that was 10th canto. I can't be sure.
It was the 10th one.
It was?
Okay. Thank you. And Jean, Loka had shared like the website that they use. I wrote it down somewhere, but it has like all the Vedic, what is it called? The Veda base, and like it has like access to like all the text. So
okay.
You might be able to
Rita will probably knows it's the vedabase.io. But Rita, I'm sure we'll share that.
Amrita. Oh, is that, oh, that's, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand what you said.
Anybody has any questions? Any other thoughts?
Loka? Mm.
Yes, go ahead.
No, I think Jean brought up a good, interesting question about like where we're all of our starting points and kind of just how would you say to learn and know Krishna better. I mean, Jean probably can explain it more easily than I can, but from my point of view, sometimes it seems a bit overwhelming. Particularly this last lesson, because I come from a heart space, and so I'm not really into the intellectual text stuff as I've expressed before. So there are a lot of emphases and stuff. It just takes me out of what I feel, like what you're saying, what Bhakti Yoga is about, versus me trying to learn all these different, steps and phrases and what does all mean. It's just like, okay, I understand what you're trying to do, but it takes me out of what I actually really feel about God, and I'm already there. So this to me feels like a good layer, but it's just not something I can process all together at once. For me personally, that's all I'm saying. So Jean brought up that point, and I just thought that's something I wanted to share, but that's all I wanted to say.
No, I perfectly understand that, and that's why Krishna, he says that just focus on me in love, and we don't have to. The only reason he explains these other concepts, Brahman and Paramatma, and different yoga systems, is that there are people who are interested in those, and they will only be attracted to those. So to at least connect them to him through those methods, he explains them. And as practitioners of bhakti, it helps us to understand, at least understand these different realizations or aspects of God, because we can see them once. Like before, for me, when I didn't understand this, the whole thing appears very confusing. Some people are doing this, some people are doing that, and isn't God there only one God? So why are people worshiping him in so many different ways? And it was so confusing to me. But when I understood all these different ways of approaching God, then I can understand, oh, okay, in this particular tradition, this is how God is approached, and now I can see what they're doing and how they are approaching God. So now I can find the unity in all the different ways people approach God, rather than seeing them, oh, this is not similar to what my belief is, and therefore I don't agree with what they're doing. But now we can see the unity. Once you understand things in different ways people approach God, you can see the unity rather than the differences so much. So that's how it helps. Because you will see some traditions, they are more focused on, even within Hinduism, you'll see a lot of traditions are just focused on this impersonal Brahman realization. They are not so interested in the personal form of God. And that's what it is. We are here in Bali, and this is an offshoot of Hinduism. The whole culture here, it's very based in Hinduism. Everywhere you go, you will see statues of Ganesha or Vishnu or Brahma or Shiva. People are offering. Throughout the day, they are making offerings. Every single person, even like a very high-end store, like wherever you go, even there, they are making an offering. But their concept of God is more Brahman based. That's what we see here. They don't have a particular deity in their temples that they worship. There's no deity in the temple. The temples are just a compound where they worship just the Brahman. That's what they believe in. The other traditions, again, more Brahman based. Some traditions are more Paramatma based. And some traditions are more Bhagavan, loving God. person based. So then you start seeing, okay, this is where it is going, and it helps to connect with them at that level rather than discriminating. So I
Thank
hope
you.
that helps.
No, thank you. Because when it starts feeling like a geometry problem, then that's when I lose it because I sucked at geometry. So, I just have, so the information is good. I just have to be slow in taking it all in. That's all.
No, I agree. It's complex, and then it took me some time to wrap my head around it. So I don't blame you.
Thank you.
Anybody else, Kimberly? And some of you, I've never seen you. If you don't mind turning on your video, at least we can see you once before the course ends. So we make a personal connection. That would be, so we can go beyond the impersonal realization of each other to a more personal realization. Go ahead.
Sorry, Loka, you said you were going to return, and I'm still a little confused as to how, like, where the difference is in when, like, appealing to God for help is different than wanting something like as the super. I'm having a little difficult understanding.
Yeah.
The,
Okay. Yeah. So the super soul, see, asking God for help is different than engaging in the full-time pursuit of realizing God as a super soul with intention of just getting the siddhis. That's a part of Ashtanga yoga where the yogis, they just sit in meditation for thousands and thousands of years, just trying to realize God as a super soul and getting these yogic siddhis from God. That's their focus. And it's different than a practitioner of bhakti yoga or a personal relationship where you're having some difficulty in your life and you approach God for help. And Krishna says in the 7th chapter that, yeah, you can approach me with whatever issues, problems you have, because we all have problems in the material world. And Krishna actually calls, he appreciates when we approach him. He said, there's no need to approach anybody else. So just the fact that we approach God to solve our problem, that means we accept God as somebody who can take care of us. And we have faith in that he will take care of us. And that's a very deep level of personal. The yogis, they are not approaching God to solve their problems. They are approaching God to, in awe and reverence and to get some yogic siddhis. Very rarely some yogi will approach God as a super soul for higher realization, but most of the yogis, they approach God for Brahman or for Paramatma realization just to get the yogic siddhis. So your question about asking help from God is very different situation than the yogis approaching God for the yogic powers. It's very different.
thank you. That really cleared it up for me. Thanks.
So just like a child approaches parent when they're in trouble, right? So I need help, mommy, come down. I need help with my homework or cut my finger or whatever it is. It's an implicit level of trust between the parent and child, and the child doesn't go to the neighbor, right? He doesn't go to a stranger. He just calls the parents, implicit trust. And that's what Bhakti Yoga is having that implicit trust. And Krishna loves that when we approach him. Of course, a devotee, as we make progress, we don't want to bother God for every single thing, but he doesn't mind it. That's how we develop a relationship, right? That's how we develop a relationship with God. When we see him coming through and, oh yes, I can depend on him. Right now in this material world, we are kind of burnt out by people, and we see people, we depend on people and they don't come through. And then our trust breaks and our heart breaks, and then we move on to the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. So when we approach God and we see how he helps us, and there's another thing there. There's sometimes when we approach him, he may take his time to respond. But that's another thing you have to also factor in, that he may take his time sometimes, and the help may come on his own time and terms. So if we have that faith and that love, then we are patient also. And that also helps us develop our faith, deepen our faith and trust. But there is no reason to go somewhere else. That's what Krishna says. Even if you see some delay, don't go somewhere else, because he will take care of it. And sometimes the delay in response is also taking care of it. Go ahead, man.
I just wanted to share a realization I had from something you said from the class regarding where does creativity come from when you're showing a clip from Amadeus about Mozart's life.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a question I asked many, many times, and conversation I try to hold with my friends and colleagues when I was really immersed in just making art and showing art in Chelsea. And it was just really, I remember just feeling really like struggling how to talk about it. You know, just really curious, like where does the art come from? Where does our inspirations come from? It seems like it comes out of just vacuum. And whenever I would sort of have these conversations with other artists, just to mention the word God was such a like it just was received as such a like a dirty word. And I remember receiving comments from, you know, my colleagues like, can we, like, do you really, like, what do you mean God? Do you mean, you know, can we refer to what you know, think God is? Who you think God is as higher being or great mother, or, you know, these other words that I'm understanding now, maybe, you know, are referring to Brahman in some ways. And I got this sense that, you know, that we all, this resistance to really trying to understand where our creativity and inspirations come from, the resistance to understanding that was like, now I'm realizing, wow, we were all sort of like in the position of wanting to be the controller, the creator, and wanting to take credit for that. And you know, to sort of accept that there's God is to accept that, you know, in many, like, that we are in a subordinate position, that we're not the controller. And I think especially for the community of people who are highly intellectual, maybe overly intellectual, I believe, it's such a hard concept to receive and accept. And through learning about, like, you know, the metaphysics of Krishna, it's difficult to understand, but I'm seeing now, I have, you know, I thought about, you know, this question since last class, and now, like, I'm realizing, oh, creativity and inspiration is a conversation we have with God. And when we think that way, it just changes the whole dynamic and perspective of how we can like appreciate art and approach art and inspiration. Because like not understanding that and having such a resistant to like trying to hold conversation like that sort of like made my heart really cold and like hardened, and I ended up walking away from that community. So yeah, this is so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, ultimately, not just creativity. I guess when we deny that creativity comes from God, we also deny that this creation comes from God. And ultimately, Prabhupada explains in many places that the reason we are here in this material world is our envy for God. It's hard to accept that fact that we have envy for God, but we have envy for God. And the symptom of that is if we have envy for any living entity, that means we have envy for God. And it's hard to digest that sometimes we think I'm such a good person, how can I have envy for God? But if we find ourselves being envious of anybody, that means we have envy for God as well. And I guess the whole process of bhakti yoga is to turn that envy into love. And it's going to take some time, but there is no other shortcut to that. The path of impersonal realization does not take care of that envy. Because in the path of impersonal realization, one actually, ultimate goal of that is to become God ourselves. Practitioners, they want to merge into Brahman and become Brahman themselves. The path of Paramatma realization is also not with the desire to love and serve God completely, but to become powerful, as powerful as I can get in this material world. That is the underlying motivation there. So with bhakti, we can actually get rid of this existential envy we have towards Krishna. And therefore, when we hear these objections or God sounds like a dirty word, it is because it sounds like that because of that envy we have. And it's very hard to accept that creativity or anything beautiful can come from God. We think that I have created it. But if you're so creative, then when our hairs fall off at some point or they become white, then why can't we use our creativity and make it all right again? Right? If you're so creative, then why can't we take care of a toothache that wakes us up in the middle of the night? Where does our creativity go at that point? So it's all and when I hear that, and I guess it helps me to realize my own envy towards Krishna actually. Because when I see that attitude in others, then I find myself seeing the same thing in me. That Krishna, I'm so envious of you. Even after knowing about you and hearing about you, I just don't have any love for you, and I feel myself struggling to connect with you. So we can just cry out. That's all we can do is cry out during our chanting and cry out to other devotees that please help me develop some love for Krishna. That's all we can do from our side, and have compassion for everybody else who are in the same kind of similar boat as we are. Okay, we'll take one last comment.
One thing, what we're speaking of now also helps break down the walls and the limit and the labels that we put on ourselves, whether we have degrees or whatever. It's really at the end of the day not that important because for me anyway, I just feel that, Krishna, as we all know, we emanate from Krishna, and Krishna assigns or gives us, certain talents. Everybody has a talent, no matter what it may be, how insignificant you may think it is, but it all stems from Krishna. So when we appreciate that and we nurture it, the labels and all that other stuff come down because you realize it's not from you, it's from Krishna. So that's helpful too.
That's a very good whole point. And then we are actually truly appreciate people for their talents and abilities, because it doesn't take away from a person when we think that it comes from God, right? It actually adds to their glory when we accept that. Sometimes, as Mil said, when we give the credit to God, then that means I didn't do anything, and it kind of seems to strip ourselves from that credit. But it's actually it glorifies, it enhances that person even more when we see their talents and skills coming from God. So thank you all. Won't like to hold you any longer. And so next session will be on different energies of God, and that's an important thing to understand. Prabhupada emphasized that so much in his teachings, that in order to understand God completely, we have to also understand his different energies. Because if you don't do that, then we get mixed up. We start treating the energies as God themselves, like many people do. That the energy is all powerful, material nature is all powerful, and we lose our context with God. So in the next session, we'll understand what are the different energies of God and how they work, and we'll also discuss about time, what is time and how it acts. Those are essential topics in the Bhagavad Gita. And our 11th session will be the different yoga systems, the yoga ladder. Krishna describes many different yoga systems and in the Bhagavad Gita, and they are connected with the different concepts of God, absolute truth that we discussed now. So that's why you'll be able to relate. Okay, Ashtanga yoga, what does it mean? Dhyana yoga, what aspect of God are they connecting to? Bhakti yoga, Raja yoga. There's so many yoga systems, and what is their domain, and what is their goal, and what is the practice? So we'll address that in session 11. And in the final session will be about Bhakti Yoga, which is the combination of all yoga systems that Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita. So we'll see you soon, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning for the meditation. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Bye-bye.